respected teachers, distinguished guests, and perhaps the most historic occasion of this school. My compliments to the administration for having such an absolutely wonderful event. It is starving, and I remember in this very lawn that you're here, we would queue here at about 3:15 to see all the girls from convent school walk by. Let me say that schools are more like mother's cooking. Everybody thinks that his mother's cooking or her mother's cooking is the finest, is the best. To that extent, I wouldn't argue with anybody if he or she would say that his or her school is the best. Of course, that is true, I would go along with it. But there are good schools and there are great schools. To me, the distinction between a good school and a great school is, in a good school, you are taught. And in a great school, you learn. The difference is important. In a good school, you are taught academics. You learn about your professional career, and as the Chief Minister also mentioned, about education. But that's not what I will remember Burnhall School for. Yes, I was taught Algebra here in class 6. I remember, and it's really amazing that in 7th class I was exposed to Bertrand Russell. In class 8 I was exposed to Somerset Maugham, which I don't see students having now, that kind of exposure. All that is true. But what Burnhall School taught me then, which I will remember all through, is what you learned was how to deal with life. We were taught here, of course, but we learned about life. About how, for instance, to deal with failures, how to adjust to different changes that one goes through, how not to get a swollen head when you got a success, and how to be humane, and how to essentially enjoy life. It was a very different thing, how to turn an adversarial situation into one of your advantage. I was in class 7th, and I was eating a sandwich in this building. Somebody from behind took the sandwich from my hand, and I turned around. Before I could see it was, I said to this person, I didn't know who it was, I said, "You are a pig." When I turned around, it was the principal of the school, Father Farrow. And you could have imagined my plight. A student of class 6th or 7th turns around to face Father Farrow in a black gown and says, "You are a pig." And Father Farrow's response was, "Yes, of course, I am a pig. I am polite, intelligent, and gentle." That is Burnhall School for you. Amazing. He's a very big entrepreneur in KNK right now, Haseeb Drabu. We were being taught volleyball. He made a mistake. Father Farrow walked across and slapped him and said, "You don't play it like this, you play it like that." And 5 minutes later, Father Farrow made the same mistake. Yusuf glared at him, basically telling him, "Now you have made the mistake." Father Farrow walked up and said, "Come on, Yusuf, slap me." And Yusuf went right across and slapped him. Show me one school in the world where a student has slapped his principal and there was no retribution at all. That's the kind of school that I have learned in and I have come to. What was the kind of stuff that I would remember? And what made Burnhall School very distinctive? One was tremendous intellectual rigor. As I said, I can't think of very many people in very many schools in India or abroad who would get exposed to Bertrand Russell in class 7. We used to have a tea break in here, in Father Farrow's room, and tea was available to every student. He would go across, sit there, and pick up any book that he wanted and read. There was no questions asked. You could borrow it, put it back. The kind of intellectual freedom is unprecedented even today. We were encouraged to indigenize content of books. I remember we used to read moral science, which had a very Anglo-Saxon tradition of morality. And I remember we were encouraged to convert those gospel or stories into Indian situations. And the more we went out of the textbook, the more we were kind of encouraged. That's the kind of rigor we were. The second thing I remember was tremendous amount of self-discipline. In examinations, right through from class 2 to class 10, I have never appeared in an exam on a separate piece of paper. It was the same notebook that we would work on it on a daily basis. We would just leave one page, turn it around and start the exam with the entire set of books in front of us. Never have I seen any student turn the page to copy from the book. I can tell you honestly, there were moments, hours, when nobody was supervising us. But that's the kind of temptation, resistance to temptation that was brought in, inculcated by our school. The third part was tremendous amount of freedom of thought. As I said, this episode about, the pig, plus of course, the way one was encouraged to deal with our principals. I remember one of the finest times in our school used to be when convent school had a fun fair. We didn't have all this jazz at that point of time. We were very, very conservative. And we would forge signatures from our parents saying this, my ward or my son is not feeling well today, so please let him go early. When Father John received 19 applications from my class, of which I had forged 13, he started getting one day as to what was happening. He knew what we were trying to do. We were trying to go to convent school and have fun at the fun fair. That kind of freedom, acceptance of that zone of freedom, was something that gave us a different sense of how to live life. Fourth was this whole issue of sensitivity. I remember we used to have a scout section, and I was one of the people in that scout section, and we would visit Father Pharaoh's room very often. We had a sports day, and we were shown photographs of the sports show. We would pick and choose some of them, and then we would pay, I think, a couple of rupees to get a photograph. I chose one picture, which was a picture of the audience, and I told Father Pharaoh, I said, I want this picture. So he looked at the picture and saw an audience. He said, who is in here? So I said, my mother. Everybody else got his picture the next day or 2 days later, 3 days later. Mine didn't come for a week, 10 days. So I got very upset one day and I asked Father Pharaoh, I said, I asked you for the picture, I haven't still got it. He said, well, there's something wrong with the picture, I'll get it for you, we'll try and get it for you. About 10 days later, he called me to his room and took out a packet. The picture was enlarged and framed in a steel frame. I still have it. And said, please give it to your mother, but don't tell her that I bought it for you. Tell her you saved money and then you bought it for her. That was the degree of sensitivity that our teachers taught us. Finally was this whole adaptability to failure. I don't know why, but all through our 11, 12 years in school, we were taught how to deal with failure. In fact, it was in some ways forced on us. Through that evening in this very lawn, to do the sack race, the result was, while in the stilts race I was coming first, in the sack race I came last. The whole point was that you should not be used to success, and you must know how to deal with failure. And that the next day I lost the race very obviously, but then the subsequent day we used to have our assembly in this very lawn. He actually gave me a much larger prize and said, this is for adapting to failure very well. That has stood me in good stead. And above all, the thing that I would leave with everybody else is the motto of the school, which is Industria Florimus, which is by hard work we prosper. That's one abiding principle that one has stayed with. It's been a great privilege to be a part of the school, and Burnhall has done all Burnhallians very, very proud. It's now time that the Burnhallians do Burnhall proud. I look at the future, and what do I see? I see the fact that the top leaders of J&K are all ex-Burnhallians. And as we said last time in the alumni meet, that I would imagine that the final issue on Kashmir will be settled on the playfields of Burnhall School. Thank you very much. It's been a privilege.